Hello again to Obduction. We were about to enter this room belonging to Farley, the daughter at least, who might still be alive. I keep forgetting her first name. So we opened the code lock with the code we found on the mailbox of the White House. And now we're about to enter. Could be that we walked all the way behind it. Let's check this map. Okay, yeah, tree and tower, I know where that is. Bosque, plateau, scrapyard, fuel supplies, Bleeder Lake and rail yard. This is actually a better map than the one with the power map. Farley's wall, cemetery, entry canyon. Yeah, we've came through there. Town, battery, shop, CWs, water source and falls. Oh, the scrapyard is behind that. Okay. What's this? Can we lower it? 15. Let's take a picture of that. What else do we have here? Place seems like a mess. More notes. Let's read them. I shall document the curious events that have transpired with myself, my family, friends and co-workers. Hartnell was a peaceful mining town founded by my grandfather and nestled... What? I don't know, it's a little hard to read. And nestled wherein? The red rock of the desert on the Arizona territory. It's really hard to read. Inhabitants heard at a mighty explosion on the night of June 27th, 1903. I sent several workers through the town to verify that the explosion had not caused any injuries or damage to mining equipment. They returned and reported that we must have been a loud clap of thunder caused by dry lightning, for they found me damage. Yeah, I'm very sorry if I'm not reading this correctly. It's kind of hard to read again. It was not the light of the next morning that we were amazed to realize something profound had indeed occurred, as some point during that night our entire morning facility, I'm not sure what it says, and a large circle of the land around it seemed to have been scooped up and carried off to a completely different place, all without anyone knowing about it. So that explains the weird purple world. So it was back in 1903. Considering it's like modern times, this is more than 100 years ago then. There's another one of these notes. This one is a little more readable because it's bigger, the letters are bigger. The entire landscape outside of our circle of desert could only be described as alien large land. Floating rocks could be seen on a distance. No one had ever seen anything like it anywhere on Earth. We fully explored our new surroundings, hoping to find a way home. No way home was ever found. In fact, we soon discovered what we take for granted now. Not only could we not get back home, we could also not access the landscape outside the desert. Curiously, we discovered that a flow of water was provided from a high point of rock. We discovered a small tree growing on the very center of the circle. Our central tree that is so important to our lives here was just a mere sapling back then. Okay, that's the cherry tree. More notes. Special description. Mofang. Through ambassador seeds, the Mofang were the first non-human species humans were introduced to. Anne Liang was the first to call the alien a Mofang. Oh, it refers to an alien. Impressed with their advanced ability to imitate our sounds, movements, and mannerisms. Although they have a name for themselves, their language is mostly unpronounceable by humans. As a result, and because of their mimicry abilities, communication with the Mofang is primarily accomplished by their learning human languages rather than humans learning to speak Mofang. They have been able to learn almost every human language represented in Hunrath, enough to provide functional, if rudimentary, communication. The Mofang basic external morphology is remarkably humanoid. Bilateral symmetrical tetrapods, bipedal head with anterior facial features, mouth. Is there more to it? There is. Eyes, nostrils. Other external features include minimal body hair and raised dorsal protrusions. Constitution is somewhat frail, due apparently to their thin and lightweight internal structure, but internal investigation has not been possible. They have ample cranial space to account for a substantial brain, and their intelligence is impressive, as evidenced by their advanced technology. Okay, that certainly looks like an alien. 3 fingers on each hand. No genitals. Same kind of build indeed, but more like a reptile head. There's more. Arai. After a certain level of maturity and health of the tree, a passage opened at its base. This passage allowed contact with 2 additional species. First contact was with the Arai. More aliens. The first contact revealed the Arai to be large beetle-like insects. We were unable to communicate directly with them in any way, but they appeared to have some rudimentary level of intelligence. It was Lorink Toth who first made the journey through the heart to Keptar, and named both the New World and the inhabitants. By going inside the tree, the Arai have 3 distinct variants that have come to be referred to as barnacle, beetle, and polyarch, although their morphology is dramatically different from human. Their internal systems, like all of our neighbors, are supported by similar atmospheric composition and basic nutrients. In their barnacle stage, the Arai are completely immobile. The Arai stay in this egg-like development state seemingly indefinitely. In order to hatch, they must be in proximity of a polyarch and fertilized by the beetles after a certain stage of maturity. The beetles are the eyes and ears, hands and feet. With only a minimal nervous system of their own, they are essentially the sensory extensions of the immobile polyarchs. They are able to execute simple commands, but apparently have very little in the way of individual sentience. Okay, they are very different. They look a bit like the laser beams. And more of like the alien from the Alien movies. There's more. There's quite a lot. The Arai polyarchs are the intelligence and consciousness of the species. Although it was obvious that there was intelligence behind the species, it wasn't until Caroline Farley, that's what is her first name, Caroline, so who wrote this then, began spending large amounts of time in close proximity that deeper communication began. With the room nearby, Farley was the first to communicate non-verbally and learn much about the species, including some historical information. The Arai species survived in the world while several other sentient species came and went. Among them an ancient species who formed a deeper relationship with the Arai, carving temples and dwellings for them in the rocks. We've seen that. And later a more recent species that took over much of their homeworld. This latter species was especially adept at mechanical construction, using it mostly to capture and process large flying creatures, using the beetles as bait. Okay, those are the beetles. So we're getting to learn a lot more about abduction. Aliens mingling with humans. Villein. The final species to be discovered were the Villein. The Villein had been communicating with the Arai for many years through ambassador seeds, but became part of the larger community very shortly after the Arai. It's beginning to sound like Mass Effect now. With a large and imposing frame and a form of communication based on a complex multi-voiced, low-frequency rumble, the initial introductions were intimidating. After several attempts, Amélie Vidal was able to begin some rudimentary communication and began visiting the Villein in Murray, which she named on a regular basis. She discovered a complex and mating society that was able to use their technology in unexpected ways. They had the ability to quickly transform their world using extruded structures based on some form of complex miniature substrate material. Alright. Unlike the other worlds, the Villein sphere is scooped out of a Villein resettlement group that was preparing to set off into space to find a new homeworld. This was their way of life, to put themselves into stasis and scatter themselves through the stars. As mentioned previously, their appearance is imposing, standing about 9 feet tall with a distinct reptilian resemblance. They have 6 limbs, 2 muscular legs and arms, and a smaller set of arms. They control every aspect of their technology with their vocalizations. But over the years they have created control panels based on their number system that allow other species to easier access elements of their technology. How kind. Ooh, those are big. Super mutants. Kind of weird. Big arms and very tiny arms. Look like orcs. And that's it. So we learned about 3 alien species. Interesting. Maybe we can get to their worlds later on. There's more. This will be a reading heavy episode. Communication, talking with our neighbors. We take communication for granted, even with the varied language we find here in Hunrath. But when we suddenly find ourselves among other intelligent species who don't share our culture, history, DNA or vocal cords, it requires a huge amount of effort for the beginning of rudimentary chatting. This quick overview will set the stage for what to expect when communicating with our neighbors. Mofang. The Mofang were the first non-humans we met. With at least some level of similar physical vocal generating abilities, they picked up human words quickly. This early mimicry resulted in what the species became to be called. Even though they were able to mimic single words and simple phrases, it became evident over the years that huge grammatical differences were not easily overcome. Some have proposed that the difficulty may have arisen because the Mofang insisted on attempting to learn every human language, and as a result were never able to log onto any consistent grammatical structure. Nevertheless, in spite of the rudimentary sentence construction, it has been very easy to communicate, and it has been unnecessary for us to learn their language beyond a few simple phrases and proper names. If you'd like to learn more about communication with the Mofang, please contact Tam. Alright. Villein. The Villein have presented a particular communication challenge. From what we can gather, they produce sounds using 2 large reed-like structures inside opposite sides of their heads. The vibrations generated are channeled to resonance chambers in their skulls, where they are combined into a complex low-frequency dual tone. The low-frequency bitonal sounds are not only hard for humans to hear and resolve, but impossible for us to mimic. And the Villein's hearing is also oriented towards low frequency, so they are unable to hear most of sounds associated with human speech. Therefore, communication with the Villein has relied on technology. They have adapted consoles, which the Villein fluently control with vocalization, for use by other species. Over the years, some individuals of other species, including a few humans, have learned to communicate very effectively using this method. Humans have been able to pick out some higher frequency characteristics of certain key Villein words over the years, and although we can't speak to them in a way that the Villeins can understand, we are occasionally able to hear and recognize these words when spoken distinctly by the Villein. If you'd like to learn more about communication with the Villein, please contact Vito. And then the last one, the Arai. None of of the stages of the Arai morphology have any vocalization apparatus. Because of the obvious synchronization of the barnacle, flash, and the ability of the pawns to provide for and address the needs of the polyarchs, it was assumed that the species could communicate effectively. It was not until Farley began to spend large amounts of time in the polyarch antechamber that the first clues to this communication became evident. After months of research, Farley began to have limited success with receiving some kind of simple messages that were coming from the polyarchs. It is apparent now that the polyarchs had been attempting to communicate the entire time, but they themselves had been experimenting with various channels until they finally got a response from Farley. After this breakthrough, others were able to tune in to the polyarchs and learn to listen. Both the polyarchs and the pawns have a simple organ that can sense human vocal frequency, enabling them to sense simple responses from humans, but over the years Farley was able to learn to speak to the polyarchs via a related form of extrasensory transmission. If you'd like to learn more about communication with the Arai, please contact Farley. Then who wrote these notes? Maybe the daughter of Caroline? So all these aliens seem to be non-hostile, which is good. And a little more logical maybe, because they would be intelligent and they would want to explore. But yeah, you can never tell with aliens. And there's another book. Let's check that out. Seed information. More reading. Ambassador seeds. Ambassador seeds were first documented about 150 Earth years ago. They occur about once every 400 days if the trees remain healthy. Natural seed swaps occur between pairs of seeds that we now know dropped simultaneously from healthy trees in paired sphere. When each seed was touched by a species in sphere, the swap occurred, sending an ambassador from each sphere to the paired sphere. Location of the swap is defined by the locations of the pairs of seeds. After the first swap, the seeds recharged quickly, allowing for a quick return. First meetings were intense but naturally short. It was quite a surprise for both the Mofang and us. Over time, the seeds required more time to recharge, producing longer visits between species. These alien species seem more intelligent than humans, although what I've read so far implies that they were both equally intelligent. I'm not sure. Collector seeds. Everyone who arrives is familiar with the collector seeds. The bright light that we were all drawn to right before the event that brought us here is a collector seed. What new arrivers may not be aware of is that these seeds, like all seeds, come in pairs. When the tree drops a collector seed on the ground, it signals that its twin has begun its quest for a new being. That search may take hours or it may take years. When an appropriate situation, unnatural threat of death, is found, the seed activates and swaps a smaller but varying sized sphere from Earth, or whatever appropriate home world, here to Hunrath. As Hunrath became more populated, we would watch for a newly dropped collector seed, collect it and place it in the entry canyon area. That's where we've been teleporting to. So maybe it was a seed that teleported us. This allowed us to provide a more predictable entry experience for new arrivers, like us, and provide a single area to collect any resources that may have come along with a new arriver. Interesting. There's more. Unlike ambassador seeds, did not meant to do that. Was not done with that. And mother seeds, collector seeds, do not seem to survive. The inner core is spent, leaving only the lifeless outer husk. That's what we saw. Alright. Then we have mother seeds, postulated but unverified. First suggested by Elima Hemsa, the notion of mother seeds extrapolates the behavior of the lesser seeds to a superseed. She posited that the process that actually created the paired spheres was similar to all other swaps, but on a much grander scale. The idea is that two seeds from a mother tree were scattered on the galactic winds to find appropriately similar environments. When matches were found, some process was triggered that swapped large portions of landscape between vastly different worlds. Alima further noted, that the trees' locations in the center of the sphere suggested that the trees grew from these mother seeds. Because of the similarities, it has been conjectured that the reswapping the entire environmental spheres might be possible with a larger scale version of the ambassador seed machine. And that's the end of it. So we learn about aliens, we learn about seeds, we learn a lot. So what else can we get from this room? Let's see.